90%. In the cold language of statistics, that is a number that usually signals an impending total takeover. It is a landslide victory, a dominant trait on the verge of extinguishing all competition. But in the world of human biology, that specific 90 to 10 split is a glaring, neon-lit anomaly. Imagine you are standing in a crowded room, and I ask you to reach out and grab a pen. You don't pause to deliberate. You don't weigh the pros and cons of your left limb versus your right. Your brain has already sent a high-speed electrical signal to your right arm before the conscious part of your mind even realizes there was a choice to be made. You are a biological puppet to a script written before your species even had a name. You think you are the architect of your own movements, but the reality is that your body abandoned its perfect outward symmetry for a reason that is buried nearly 2 million years deep in the fossil record. You aren't choosing your hand. You are executing an ancient command. And if you think this is just a minor quirk of your personality, you are dangerously mistaken. That might sound like a bold claim for something as mundane as which hand you use to brush your teeth. But the myth that handedness is just a habit or a simple genetic coin flip is the first thing we have to dismantle. Many people grow up believing that being right-handed is just the default, and being left-handed is a minor developmental error, a glitch in the matrix of human growth. Others believe the popular pop psychology myth that left-handers are inherently more creative because they use the right side of their brain. Both of these ideas are fundamentally wrong. Handedness is not a habit you picked up in kindergarten, and it is certainly not a superficial preference. It is a visible manifestation of how your brain is physically wired. If we look at the brain, it is split into two hemispheres connected by a bridge of 300 million nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. Because of a strange neurological quirk called contralateral control, your left hemisphere handles the right side of your body, and your right hemisphere handles the left. When you see 90% of the population favoring their right hand, you aren't seeing a preference for a limb. You are seeing a massive, species-wide dominance of the left hemisphere of the brain. The question isn't why we use our right hands. The question is why our brains decided to put one side in charge of almost everything that matters. Could it be that this lopsidedness is the only reason we survived the predator-filled plains of our ancestors? The answer begins with the realization that your dominant hand is actually a secondary passenger on the same neural hardware that allows you to speak. For a long time, researchers treated tool use and language as two completely different evolutionary milestones, but modern neuroscience has revealed they are deeply intertwined. In about 95% of right-handed people, the left hemisphere of the brain isn't just in charge of their hand, it is also the primary seat of language processing, grammar, and speech production. This is no accident. Think about what it actually takes to say a sentence. You have to coordinate the muscles of your tongue, throat, and lips in a lightning-fast, precisely timed sequence, where a delay of even a few milliseconds turns a word into gibberish. Now, think about what it takes to manufacture a stone tool or thread a needle. It requires the exact same thing: rapid, sequential, exquisitely timed motor control. Researchers like the late psychologist Michael Corballis argued that these two abilities didn't just happen to end up on the same side of the brain by chance. They evolved as a single, general-purpose system for complex sequences. We became right-handed because we became a speaking species, and the brain decided it was more efficient to run both of those high-performance programs on the same processor. But this creates a massive vulnerability. By putting all our specialized eggs in one hemispheric basket, were we leaving ourselves open to a type of mental overload that should have been fatal? But surely, you might argue, it would be safer and more effective to have both sides of the brain be equally capable. If one side is damaged, the other could take over. In a perfectly symmetrical world, we would be ambidextrous. However, nature has a very different opinion on the value of symmetry. This division of labor, which scientists call lateralization, isn't actually a human invention at all. It is a strategy that goes back hundreds of millions of years, long before the first mammal ever walked the earth. We see it in fish, in birds, and even in reptiles. One of the most famous studies in this field was conducted by researcher Leslie Rogers, who looked at the brain organization of baby chickens. Rogers found that chicks with lateralized brains, meaning one side of their brain was specialized for certain tasks, were significantly better at surviving than chicks who used both sides of their brain for everything. Specifically, the lateralized chicks could search the ground for food with one eye, while simultaneously using the other eye to scan the sky for predators. The non-lateralized chicks couldn't handle the dual tasking. They would get so focused on pecking for grain that they wouldn't notice the hawk circling above until it was too late. Specialization wasn't just a quirk. It was an engineering solution to the problem of a complex environment. It allowed the brain to run two different operating systems at once without them crashing into each other. But if this specialization is so ancient and universal, why are humans the only ones who took it to such an extreme that it dictates our every physical move? That seems like a perfect explanation for why we have specialized brains, but it fails to explain the sheer intensity of the human 90-to-10 ratio. When we look at our closest living relatives, the great apes, the pattern falls apart. Chimpanzees and gorillas do show individual hand preferences. A single chimp might favor his left hand for termite fishing, but at the population level, they are roughly 50-50. There is no right-handed chimp kingdom. Humans are the absolute outliers of the primate world. So, what happened in our lineage that didn't happen to the bonobos or the orangutans? The turning point appears to be the moment we stood up. For millions of years, our ancestors' hands were occupied with the job of moving. If you are climbing trees or knuckle walking, you need both limbs to be equally strong and rhythmic. You can't afford a dominant leg when you're running for your life. But when we transitioned to full-time bipedalism, we essentially handed our arms a permanent pink slip from the transportation department. They were suddenly free. For the first time in evolutionary history, one hand could become the dedicated specialist for high-precision tasks, while the other became the dedicated stabilizer. This freedom allowed the left hemisphere's existing preference for sequential motor control to explode in intensity. We didn't just get better at using our hands. We turned one of them into a surgical instrument. But how can we be so sure this happened millions of years ago when flesh and brains don't survive as fossils? Actually, we don't need brain tissue to see the handedness of a man who died nearly 2 million years ago. We only need his teeth. It sounds like something out of a forensic thriller, but the most convincing evidence for ancient handedness comes from the microscopic scratches on the enamel of prehistoric jawbones. Early humans in the genus Homo, like Homo habilis, didn't just use their hands for tools. They used their mouths as a third hand. They would grip a piece of animal hide or plant fiber between their front teeth and pull it taut with one hand while using a sharp stone tool in the other to scrape or cut it. Every time they did this, the stone tool would accidentally nick the front teeth, leaving tiny diagonal scratches. If the person was right-handed, the scratches would angle from the upper left to the lower right. If they were left-handed, the angle would be mirrored. When researchers analyzed the 1.8 million-year-old remains of Homo habilis, they found a pattern of scratches that was unmistakably right-handed. This tells us something staggering. The neurological wiring that makes you reach for your phone with your right hand today was already fully operational in a creature that hadn't even discovered fire yet. We have been running this right-handed 1.0 software for 2 million years without an update. But this brings us to the most frustrating part of the puzzle. If right-handedness is so deeply baked into our success as a species, and if it's tied to the very language that makes us human, why is that 10% still here? Why didn't evolution just finish the job and delete left-handedness from the gene pool entirely? That is the question that has kept evolutionary biologists awake at night, because left-handedness isn't just a neutral trait. Statistically, being a left-hander in a right-handed world is a massive disadvantage. For most of history, tools, weapons, and heavy machinery were designed with an inherent bias that made them awkward, and sometimes even dangerous for the 10%. From a genetic standpoint, if a trait carries a cost and offers no obvious benefit, natural selection should grind it down to zero. Yet, in every single human population ever studied, from the Inuit of the Arctic to the Yanomami of the Amazon, that 10% remains as steady as a heartbeat. It has survived the rise and fall of empires, the invention of the printing press, and the Industrial Revolution. This suggests that left-handedness isn't an evolutionary accident or a lingering glitch. It is a strategic reserve. There is a hidden, high-stakes reason why nature refuses to let the left-hander disappear. And that reason isn't found in the laboratory or the library. It is found in the ring. This is where we encounter the fighting hypothesis, and it is one of the most elegant explanations in all of biology. To understand it, you have to stop thinking about cooperation and start thinking about direct, violent confrontation. In a world that is 90% right-handed, almost every human who has ever lived has spent their entire life practicing combat against right-handed opponents. Their reflexes are tuned to a specific set of angles. Their brain has built-in expectations for where a punch will come from, how a spear will be thrust, and how an opponent will shift their weight. Now, imagine a left-handed fighter entering that arena. They are a mirror image of everything the right-hander has trained for. The punches come from the wrong side. The footwork is inverted. The right-hander is suddenly in a state of cognitive dissonance, forced to process unfamiliar data in the middle of a life-or-death struggle. The left-hander, however, doesn't have this problem. Because they are the minority, they have spent their entire life fighting right-handers. They are perfectly comfortable in a world of mirrored movements. This creates what biologists call negative frequency-dependent selection. The rarer the trait is, the more valuable it becomes. If left-handers were 50% of the population, the advantage would vanish because everyone would be used to fighting them. But at 10%, they are a permanent, lethal surprise. The data backing this up is nothing short of spectacular. Researchers have looked at over 13,000 professional athletes across various combat sports, and the results are undeniable. In sports where you are directly reacting to an opponent's movements in real time, left-handers are massively overrepresented. In professional boxing and MMA, left-handed southpaws consistently hold win rates and championship titles far above their 10% share of the general population. The same pattern holds true in fencing, tennis, and baseball. If you are a left-handed pitcher or a left-handed batter, you are playing a different game than everyone else, one where the majority is always at a slight, frustrating disadvantage. But there's a catch. If you look at sports where there is no direct physical reaction to an opponent, like golf or bowling, the left-handed advantage completely disappears. In professional golf, left-handers show up at a rate of only about 4%, which is actually lower than their representation in the general public. This proves that being left-handed isn't about being a better athlete in a general sense. It is specifically about the element of surprise in a confrontation. We kept the 10% because every once in a while, our survival as a group depended on having someone who could move in a way that no one else saw coming. But this creates a fascinating tension. If being a left-hander is such a combat superpower, why aren't there more of them? Why didn't the fighters take over the world? This is where the balance of human nature reveals itself. We are not just a species of fighters. We are, more importantly, a species of cooperators. And cooperation loves uniformity. If you are a group of ancient humans trying to share tools, it is much more efficient if everyone uses the same hand. If you are teaching a child how to carve a spear or prepare a hide, the process is much faster if you aren't constantly trying to mirror each other's movements. Our language, our culture, and our technology are all built on the foundation of shared, predictable standards. Right-handedness became the standard because the left hemisphere was already busy handling the sequencing of our thoughts. Evolution struck a bargain. 90% of us would be the standardized, cooperative workforce that builds the civilization, and 10% of us would be the unpredictable wildcards who can defend it when things get violent. The 90-10 split isn't an accident. It is the exact equilibrium point where the benefits of cooperation meet the benefits of competition. It is the math of human survival, rendered in bone and muscle. This brings us to a final, startling realization. When you look at your own hand, you aren't just looking at a tool for eating or writing. You are looking at a living map of the two greatest forces that shaped the human race: our ability to talk to each other and our ability to kill each other. Your right hand is a side effect of the grammar in your brain, a physical echo of the same neural circuits that allow you to say, "I love you" or "help me." And the fact that some people use the other hand is a reminder that our ancestors lived in a world where being predictable was often a death sentence. We are a lopsided species because a perfectly balanced brain would have been too slow to handle the complexity of being human. We traded symmetry for speed, and we traded uniformity for a fighting chance. Think back to that moment at the start of this journey, when I asked you to imagine raising your hand. Most of you felt that phantom twitch in your right arm. That wasn't a choice you made today, or even a choice your parents made for you. It was a choice made 1.8 million years ago by a small-brained hominin standing on a dusty savanna trying to hold a piece of animal skin with his teeth. He reached for his stone tool with his right hand because his left brain was already starting to organize the very first precursors of the language I am using to talk to you right now. He didn't know he was setting the template for every human who would follow. He didn't know that his handedness would eventually be written into the architecture of cathedrals, the controls of fighter jets, and the design of every keyboard on the planet. He was just trying to survive. And you are the proof that his strategy worked. The next time you see someone writing with their left hand, or the next time you find yourself struggling with a pair of scissors that feels like it was designed by an alien, don't just see a minor inconvenience. See the fighting hypothesis in action. See the 10% who represent the ancient necessity of being different. We live in a world that tries very hard to make everyone the same, to standardize our schools, our jobs, and our digital lives. But our own bodies carry a permanent physical protest against that uniformity. We are a species that requires a minority to keep the majority on its toes. We are a species that functions precisely because we aren't all the same. If we were all right-handed, we would be a little more efficient, but we would be far more vulnerable. If we were all 50-50, our societies would likely have crumbled under the weight of their own coordination failures long ago. The 90-10 split is the Goldilocks zone of human biology. It is a sobering thought to realize that so much of who you are, how you move, how you speak, how you react in a crisis, is dictated by a neurological arrangement that was finalized before your ancestors even knew how to wear clothes. You like to believe that you are a modern person living in a modern world. But underneath that thin veneer of civilization, you are still running on the same ancient operating system as Homo habilis. You are still using the same left hemisphere specialization to structure your sentences and your tool use. You are still benefiting from the tactical surprise of the 10%. You are not a single unified being making independent choices. You are a collection of evolutionary compromises, a walking history book of every predator we dodged and every tool we mastered. Your dominant hand is the signature of your species on the contract of survival. But why does this matter for you here in the 21st century? Because understanding the why behind your body is the first step toward understanding the why behind your mind. We often feel frustrated by the parts of ourselves we can't change, our temperaments, our instincts, our involuntary reactions. We treat them as flaws to be corrected. But as the story of handedness shows, those flaws are often the very things that kept our lineage alive for 2 million years. The lopsidedness of your brain isn't a defect, it's a feature. It is the reason you can speak. It is the reason you can plan for the future while reacting to the present. It is the reason you are here to listen to this story at all. Every time you pick up a pen or throw a ball, you are performing a ritual that is older than the mountains. You are part of a 2 million-year-old winning streak. If this deep dive into the ancient wiring of your brain has made you look at your own hands a little differently, there are countless other biological puzzles waiting to be unraveled. We often take our most basic traits for granted, never realizing that they are the results of high-stakes evolutionary gambles. Why do we sleep? Why do we cry? Why are our brains so obsessed with patterns? These aren't just academic questions. They are the keys to understanding what you really are when all the modern distractions are stripped away. If you want to keep exploring these rabbit holes and discover the hidden logic behind the human experience, we invite you to join us for the next investigation. There is so much more to the story of your own body than you have been told. What other automatic parts of your life are actually commands from a 2 million-year-old ancestor? The reality of your existence is that you are never truly acting alone. You are the current representative of a vast, unbroken chain of individuals who all shared the same lopsided brain and the same survival instincts. Every right-handed gesture you make is a callback to the savannas of the Pleistocene. Every left-handed punch thrown in a boxing ring is a survival strategy that has outlasted the mammoths. We are a species built on a 90-10 split, a balance between the power of the group and the necessity of the outlier. You might think you are in the driver's seat of your life, but the more we learn about the brain, the more it becomes clear that your role is more like a passenger in a vehicle that was designed and test-driven long before you arrived. Your body has its own agenda, its own history, and its own reasons for everything it does. You are just along for the ride. In the end, the mystery of the 90% isn't a mystery at all. It is a testament to the brutal, beautiful efficiency of natural selection. It is a reminder that in the game of life, symmetry is a luxury, but specialization is a necessity. Your hand is the visible tip of a very deep, very old iceberg of cognitive architecture. You didn't choose it, but it chose you, and it has guided our species from the first stone tools to the stars. So, the next time you find yourself acting on instinct, don't fight it. That instinct has a 2 million-year track record of being right. You are a biological masterpiece of calculated imbalance. You are the lopsided apex predator that the universe never saw coming. The story of your handedness is the story of your humanity. It is the bridge between the way you talk and the way you act, between the ancient past and the digital present. It is a 90-10 split that defines the very boundaries of our species. And as we continue to peer deeper into our own genetic code and our own fossil history, we will likely find even more of these hidden scripts that run our lives. The more we know, the more we realize that we are just beginning to scratch the surface of what it means to be human. But for now, just look down at the hand you're using to hold your device or rest on your desk. Notice its strength, its precision, and the silent, invisible dominance of the hemisphere that controls it. You are executing an ancient, undeniable command. You are exactly what evolution intended you to be. Your brain is not a blank slate, but a meticulously organized machine that made its most important structural decisions while your ancestors were still learning how to stand. You are a walking testament to the fact that in the history of life, being a little bit crooked was the only way to stay straight. The 90-10 split is not an accident of nature. It is the reason you are currently the most successful organism on the planet. And as you go about your day, moving through a world built for your dominant hand, remember that you are carrying a legacy that is older than language itself. You are a puppet to a 2 million-year-old ghost. You are the result of a biological gamble that symmetry was a small price to pay for the ability to build a world. There is no such thing as a choice when your architecture was finished before you were born.